Shabbat Shalom. Almost Shabbat. Chaim Alevsky here, running commentary number 78, I think it is. Excited to share with you two thoughts. One both from this week's Torah portion, but one from my regular source of the Rebbe's talks, which is the Sicha Yomit, the daily Sicha, which I hear talks directly from the Rebbe's voice, live, straight from the heaven, actually through a recording. And the other one is from the daily, from this Likutei Sichos project. So, diving right in. This week's Torah portion is Mishpatim. It talks all about the civil laws of the people, those that are logical and make sense. One of them talks about when a person gives another person an object, an item for safekeeping, and asks them to guard it, to watch it. There's different levels of safekeeping. Some are paid, some are not. Long story short, the Rebbe takes this fascinating concept and makes it relevant in our life in an unusual way, very unusual, a little bit deep and abstract, and I'm struggling with it myself, but we're just going to throw it out here. So the Rebbe says that in the Torah, it talks about when you have an item, an object that was entrusted into your hands for safekeeping, and if something happens to it, if lightning strikes, if it was broken or lost or stolen, something happens to it, then you're not liable in this situation, in this kind of safekeeping. Completely not liable. Even it's complete accident, nothing. Basically, you've got no responsibility if it was given to you on the condition, and here's the point, on the condition that the words of the Torah, Im lo shalach yad b'melachet re'ehu, if you didn't send your hand, if you didn't touch the item of your friend, can't touch this. If you didn't touch it, then you're free to go, and you're not responsible, you're not liable for any of the damage or lost, anything like that. There's a dispute in the Talmud between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel about what does this mean? They didn't touch his friend's item, and they extend it. They say it actually also may mean if you spoke about, you were talking about using the item, that would also be considered touching it. So not only you can't touch it physically, but even if someone spoke about it, then he would be reliable. Spoke about using the item. And then it goes further. There's a dispute between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. They discuss about thought. If you actually had a thought to use the item, called machshavas peshia, you thought, hey, I like that tool, I think I'm going to use it for myself, then that too is considered touching the item for this context, and you become reliable and responsible for any damage that occurs. So the Rebbe takes this to a different measure, to a different world, and says, what did God give us? Look, God gave us something to keep safe. Gave us the Torah. Gave us the commandments to observe. This is the Torah. It's called Torah Hashem. It's God's Torah. It's not ours. It's not ours to touch. It's ours to use in an appropriate way. It's ours to use the way God meant it to be used. But what is an inappropriate way to touch the Torah? Says the Rebbe, if you have personal benefit from the Torah, if you pride yourself in a way and you expect to get honor, some kind of privilege, because you are a Torah scholar, and you feel that's something that you deserve more than the regular human who's not a Torah studier, that's a problem. That pride, that haughtiness is already benefiting from the Torah in a way that God didn't prescribe. That's called touching the Torah in an illegal fashion. And the Rebbe goes on and says that this is not just in physical matters, but even in your own mind. If you just think about, oh, I want to get this special aliyah, I want to sit, in an important place in the synagogue, I want to be honored. And then the Rebbe goes on further and says not only that, but someone who actually learns Torah, different track, but he doesn't learn it for the right reason because God said so. Doesn't make a proper bracha before it and after it, or before it. And a person learns Torah because it's beautiful. The Torah is so deep, so wise. Somebody learns Torah because of that. The Rebbe says that's not it. That's trying to benefit from the Torah in a personal way. It's not why God gave us the Torah. You learn Torah because God said so, and use it in the way God prescribed it. But even it's fascinating, even if you learn Torah just because it's beautiful, if you disconnect it from God, it's a problem. The Rebbe takes another example and says that the Torah is like God's clothing. Somewhere in the biblical scripture it talks about the Torah being God's clothing. It says clothing works well when they're on a person, but not when they're off in the closet and they're not aired out, they're not taken care of. So if you take the clothing of the Torah, God's clothing, but you take God out of it, then the clothing get ruined. So too, long story short, the Rebbe is taking this civil law of us touching something that doesn't belong to us and then becoming liable and responsible for anything that happens to it, and brings it to our life in a personal way. It says if we pride ourselves in the Torah in the wrong way, try to benefit from it in the wrong way, then the standard for which we are measured from above is very different. Then even if an accident happens, if lightning strikes, we're still liable, we're still responsible for that, for the Torah that went astray, that went bad. So we ourselves are, for us to be properly attuned with the Torah and measured by God in the proper way, we learn the Torah, observe the commandments, but do them just because God said so and not for any personal gain or benefit. That's a really deep thought. Think about it. It works. The next section is the Sikha that talked from the Rebbe about from this week's Likutei Sichos project, which you have there online. And that is, in a nutshell, real quickly, the Rebbe says as follows. In this week's Torah portion, it says, one of the mitzvot is, Im kesef talve esami, if you will lend money to another Jew, if. It doesn't say you shall. And then there's a ongoing dispute among Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ishmael, two great sages, that wherever the Torah says the word im, if, whether or not this is a mandatory commandment or an optional commandment. And they say as follows: when there's proof that it's mandatory, everyone agrees that it's mandatory. But when it's vague, it's not clear whether or not it's mandatory or optional, then there's a dispute. Rabbi Ishmael says that when the Torah says if you might do something, then it is optional. You don't have to do it. Rabbi Akiva says when the Torah says if you might do something, it's mandatory, you have to do it. And now the Rebbe talks about this and pretty much goes to the root and the core of their dispute and says, why does one say one and the other say the other? What is Rabbi Ishmael? And he goes as follows. He says, look at the characteristics of the people who voice their opinions. Rabbi Ishmael was a tzaddik. He was a righteous person, a righteous man. He was a Kohen Gadol. He was holy from birth, never had a temptation in his life. Rabbi Akiva was a Baal Tshuva. He was from a He was the son of converts, and he was himself a returnee. He started learning Torah when he was 40 years old. So he had a past that wasn't completely aligned with the Torah way. So Rabbi Shmuel says that if the Torah says something's optional,
Yep.
then it's optional. You can do it if you want to, you don't have to if you don't. Because he is a righteous man and he's coming from a place that knows that he's going to do it anyway. The Torah doesn't have to command you to do something. It could just tell you it's optional and it's fine. Because you're going to do it anyway. Rabbi Akiva says, not necessarily. He's coming from a place of Baal Tshuva, where there's a lot more passion. And there's a past that a person thinks about often and says, I was there and I tasted that part of the world. And it's not so easy for me to live this kind of a life. So Rabbi Akiva says, when the Torah says, if you might do this mitzvah, it's mandatory, you have to do it. Because a Baal Tshuva, like Rabbi Akiva and all of us really, need extra encouragement in order to do the right thing. We need to go overboard sometimes, or we need to get extra help from above. And the Rebbe's final thought, the Rebbe brought down saying from the Talmud. The Talmud says a person should not say, I don't want to eat pig, I don't want to eat pork, I don't want non-kosher food. A person should say, I want it. But what should I do? God doesn't let me have it. Or for any other mitzvah, or any other thing that we're told to hold back from. A person shouldn't kind of fake it and say, oh, I don't want it. A person should say, I do want it. Almost like, be truthful. But what should I do? God said no. So the Maggid of Mizrich said, interestingly, he said that applies only to a tzaddik. A tzaddik, a righteous person who has no desire, no pull, no draw anyway to anything anti-God. He could say, I want it, because he's not going to do it anyway. He doesn't care about it. But a Baal Tshuva, like everyone in our generation pretty much, most people are considered Baal Tshuva, even if you were born and bred in the observant community, because we're all struggling and working. So he says, any one of us, we should say, I don't want it. We should convince ourselves that we don't want it and verbalize it and say, no, I don't want it. And that'll help us overcome the temptation because we're so close to actually doing it. So we should get all the help we need to say not. And so the Rebbe says that's why, if you think about it, the tools to help us came in this last generation where we are not so refined and we need extra help. So the tools are Chassidus. The Rebbe says the Chassidic teachings are tools that will help us. And they came specifically in these last generations, not when the people were all big and lofty and holy in the olden days, because they didn't need them then. But now we need those tools to help us overcome our struggles and obstacles. That's the story for today. God bless you. Have a good Shabbos. And see you next time around.